a lot of people who emailed and wanted to be here and were unable to be here. So if you are not wanting to be recorded today, please drop off the line and you can watch the recording that we'll post on our channel on the Microsoft Dynamics Partner YouTube channel. So my name is Sarah Jurdevig, and I have the utmost pleasure to be able to host today's call and have had a chance to visit with Margie a little bit prior to the call starting. I am filling in today. Our fearless leader, Lindsay Zwart, has departed for New Zealand for a couple weeks, and so she is just boarding a plane to fly over to New Zealand. So excited to be able to be at the helm today and be able to share with you a fantastic speaker. Before we get started, I just did want to take a step back on reflection. And it looks like I'm not taking over as presenter, so we'll get that set up. I want to just take a moment to say thank you. It was a year ago this month that we had started the Women in Partner Initiative, and it has been just a fantastic year. As of this morning, we have over 400 members on our LinkedIn page. From across Microsoft and across our partner ecosystem. We were able to host 2 luncheons with attendees, both at the Industry Summit, the Dynamics Industry Summit last spring and this fall. And we had 40 at the lunch this fall. We've had 6 webinars, so just about every other month we've had one of these amazing webinars that is so refreshing and so wonderful to be able to be a part of and get on and be able to hear the storytelling that these women have had and the experiences that these women have had. We were able to do some lean-in tables as well as some mentor sessions, and then we did an Industry Summit roundtable. So lots of great stuff happening. We're excited to do some things coming up at Inspire this summer, and we are going to continue moving throughout the next year with these web seminars. So I just want to make sure you guys can see the slides moving. All right, I'm looking at Jody, who's sitting next to me. As you know, the inspiration of the Women in Partner program is to connect, empower, and inspire female leaders in Microsoft and within our partner organizations. We do have a LinkedIn community. I know there's some people that post stories out there. We'd love to have some more activity out there, just around things that you're seeing today in the world. As it relates to women in leadership, balancing, health and wellness. Certainly there's lots of things we can do through that tool in order to be able to connect with each other. And I am very excited that we have some additional upcoming events next month, which will probably be shifting this date just slightly because we have our Digital Transformation Dynamics Days on March 8th. So we'll probably push that slightly for Art of Negotiation. Please go ahead and sign up for that right now on Eventbrite. And then in April, we have Linda Rose, who will be speaking about learning to let go. And then May, we're working on our speaker. And then June, we'll have Combating the Imposter Within with Lou Solomon, who is an author, speaker, and founder of Interact Authentic Communication. So a great lineup through the end of our fiscal year, and really looking forward to that. That said, I want to just start by saying, have you ever looked back and wished you'd been braver? Have you ever held back from a tough conversation and regretted it later? I know I certainly have. This is why you're going to enjoy our next speaker, Margie Warrell. The title of her best-selling books, Find Your Courage, Stop Playing Safe, Brave and Make Your Mark, reflect on her passion for empowering people to make braver decisions and lead a more purposeful life. Drawing on her background in Fortune 500 business, psychology, and executive coaching, Margie has run leadership programs with organizations around the world such as NASA, Microsoft, Facebook, the United Nations Foundation. She's also interviewed global leaders such as Richard Branson and Bill Marriott, sharing the insights in her Forbes column. Appointed by the Australian government as their first ambassador for women in global business and the mother of 4 teenagers, now that is bravery, Margie has learned a lot about courage and resilience since growing up on a very small dairy farm in rural Australia, and has had many adventure travels throughout over 70 countries, from Algeria to Nepal, Peru to Papua New Guinea, and most recently, she climbed Kilimanjaro with her family. Margie is a regular expert commentator in the media who has shared her insights on the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Fox News, and she's also a regular commentator, and I'm super jealous because I watch this every morning, on the Today Show and ABC News Breakfast. Needless to say, when it comes to living bravely, Margie speaks from experience. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce you today to Margie Warrell. Margie? Margie? Well, I have not climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, so I can't give her talk today. Do you want to email her?
Hello. Hello. Can you
hear
me? Sorry, I hadn't realized I hadn't come off mute. So I apologize. Well, I was just saying, I was just talking away then saying, I have been on the Today Show in the US several times, but I'm a regular contributor to the Today Show here in Australia. So if anyone's listening, they're going, but I've never seen her. So it's not there in New York.
Great.
Now, I just want to check. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you okay.
Great. I can't see the slides. Have you got my slides up there on the screen? Because they're not showing up for me.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Everyone else see the slides?
Okay. Oh, I'm not sure why I can't see them. That's really weird.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Okay. All right. For some reason I can't, but that's okay. So, oh yeah, now I can see them across the bottom. Apologies. So anyway, thank you to all of you who have called in. I really appreciate it. And, you know, I have long been passionate about supporting women to really own our own value and step up and speak up and stop doubting ourselves so much.
She's in as a guest. Oh, I love it. I need you can't hear her. It's unmuted. Margie? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
All right, now we can hear you. Restart.
Okay, so when did you lose me? I've been talking for several minutes. So
I would just start from the top again, a little bit like they did on the Grammys the other day.
Oh man, okay, all right, I'll be an Adele here. I'm not sure what was heard and what wasn't heard. This is my third start. So, firstly, I was saying thank you for the intro. And I'm on the Today Show regularly in Australia. Only been on it a few times in the US. So just to clarify that. And, you know, my passion is around supporting people across the board to really live bigger lives and to thrive in life. And I found myself working a lot with women and women in leadership and women in business, because I found again and again, we women, we tend to doubt ourselves too much and we back ourselves too little. And how much of it is our social conditioning and how we've been just raised, but we do tend to second guess ourselves so much more than the men that we live with, the men we're raising, the men we work with, work for. And so that's why I really love to help women in really owning our own value and finding our voice and speaking up and raising our sides. And what gets in the way of that for all of us human beings, but I think so particularly women, is our desire for safety, our desire for security. It's wired into our boards at birth. As human beings, we are afraid. We have an innate fear of losing face, of being rejected, of not being enough. And so often that fear that things that we don't want to happen sits there and directs our actions. And so it gets in the way, that desire for safety gets in the way of our desire for growth. And so often we're not conscious of where self-doubt or fear is keeping us from stepping up, from speaking up. So if we go to the next slide, I want to go through a few points with you today and just share with you what I think are some of the things that I think we need to do. And are you on slide number 7 now? Just want to check where the slides are at for people because I can't see them on my screen.
Yes, slide 7.
You are? Okay, great. So I'm going to go through a few different ideas with you today, and I hope that, you know, what I share will resonate and it will hit you in different ways. You know, I do a lot of speaking, and I find that, you know, sometimes when I go out and speak, some things will go, people go, yeah, that's obvious. I already get that. But for someone else, it's like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I needed to hear. So I have to just lean into my own discomfort as I share this with you today and trust that, because I can't actually see the slides. For some reason, they're not coming up on my screen. I'm not quite sure where we're at with the slides. So I'm just going to just trust that you're moving along there, Sarah, as you push them forward. So slide number 7 is really the outline of what I want to talk about. The first thing I wanted to get onto is the importance of owning your worth. You know, why is it that we so often question ourselves? And I'm in the bullet points to promote today. One of them was imposter. We talked about imposter syndrome. You know, imposter syndrome really comes about because of comparisons. We compare ourselves to others, and so often when we make comparisons, we compare our insides with others' outsides. We know how we're doing, but we can see we're trying really hard and we're struggling, but other people seem to have it all together. Or we compare our weaknesses with others' strengths, and we don't always, you know, just really own what is it that you're good at. Where is the value that you bring? And so often we continually talk ourselves down and let that get in the way of us doing what it is we're capable of doing. So as you think about, you know, what it is that you have to bring, you have a lot of value to bring to the table. But where do you sometimes even talk yourself down as you think about what that value is? And I think it's so vital for us to own our worth. The photo that you see in this slide is oh God, I've forgotten her name off the top of my head, but I'm sure you know the woman who was she's the first board member of NBC. I think so. I'm missing up my story right now. But, you know, just as women, we've got to really own our seat at the table. Now, you may not aspire to being in the C-suite, but in any meeting, in any situation, we've got to own that our opinion matters, that our opinion has value. We don't have to be the most experienced in the room, the most knowledgeable in the room, to think that we're the smartest in the room. We don't have to have been working for Microsoft for 20 years. But just to get your perspective, your opinion, the skills, the knowledge, all the things that you've learned along the way holds inherent value. And I think that is just such an important thing that we so often fail to do. And so why I can't, you know, I can't stay highly enough why we've got it. Other people won't value our what we have to bring until we really value it ourselves. So with that, you know, on the next slide, what I know a lot of women do when we suffer from imposter syndrome, we tend to work really, 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 really hard to try and prove ourselves. You know, if I bend over backwards and bust a gut, then maybe I'll prove, you know, my worth. Don't try and be proving it all the time. Just own it. Just embrace it. And if you're engaging with people around you from a place of a quiet confidence, I'm not talking arrogance, that you have value to bring, it shows up in the interactions you have. I'm going to get on to this a little bit further down the track about how we speak and communicate. But so often as women, we tend to do what's called engage in double voice discourse, where we apologize for our opinion before we even share it, because maybe what I'm saying, we're trying to mitigate the risk of other people thinking it's silly. And so, in that moment that we do that, we diminish our value. So when we own our value, we speak that way, we show up that way, we shake hands with people that way, and it really infiltrates and impacts into so much of what we do. And if you're in a leadership role, any sort of role like that, just recognize you don't lead by virtue of your position or your power or your title. You really lead by virtue of who you are. And so much of who you are comes from that internal place of how you think about who you are. And all core leadership really comes from within. And so I encourage you to just ask yourself, where am I letting, my own underestimations of my value, my own self-doubt getting in the way of how I show up and interact with people? Leadership extends from the inside out. Change begins on the inside out. And so, for you to do better in your work and for you to enjoy more of the success you want, whether it's the recognition you want, it really does start by stopping and having reflecting on, where do I get in my own way and where am I failing to really own the value that I have to bring? So the second point, I'm just wondering how I can get to, Sarah, so I can get to on my screen to actually see the slides. Presentation view. Let me just see if that's, no.
If you go up to the upper left-hand corner, there's a content view.
Yeah.
Can you switch to that? Will it let you?
No, there's a gallery view, speaker view, presentation view. That's all I can see. No.
Okay. Try the presentation view. For some reason, it's registering you're a presenter, but it registers you, I think, as an attendee.
Oh, okay. I'm going to click the present now and see. You're about to stop the current presentation and become an active presenter.
All right.
Should I do that?
Let's give it a whirl.
Okay. See where that goes to. And circle, 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 loading, loading, loading. And hopefully I haven't messed things up here. Okay, yes, I can see that. So now we're going to bump to the next slide. Fantastic. I think number 10.
Can you hit the arrow going forward to go to the?
I am hitting. Oh no, it's jumped me to 13. All right, now it was slow. Now I'm going backwards. Here's number 10.
It's because you're in Australia. It just takes a minute to
travel that much further. Isn't technology amazing?
Yes.
So I just had to share with you. I love this image of this girl. And to me, it really embodies the importance of, the message that even Sheryl Sandberg had to share about the importance of leaning in. And she talked about leaning into lots of different things, but I believe we just have to lean into our own discomfort and lean into our own self-doubt and lean into our own fear that we're not going to have what it takes and we may do a big fat belly flop and make a fool of ourselves. And there's so much research that shows that, if you want to be more confident, don't wait to feel confident. Because you could be waiting a long time to feel as confident as you would like to feel. You build confidence when you act as a confident person would act. Several years ago, I went off to circus school in Washington, D.C., where I was living, and I got up high on the platform. I thought I was going to be, this wasn't going to be that hard. I had all myself strapped in, and I got up really high, and I went to lean out, and I honestly froze with terror. And it was sort of embarrassing because people who knew me were there, some friends, and were yelling out my book titles to me: Find Your Courage, Stop Playing Safe. And, my professional pride alone was like, man, I've got to do this jump. But fear was very paralyzing. I felt very paralyzed, even though intellectually I knew that I really couldn't hurt myself. There was a safety net. I had a harness on, all sorts of things. Likewise, just recognizing sometimes when you ask yourself, what would I do if I was being brave? When you go to do it, you just freeze up. And there is a moment where you have to let go the safety of where you are and just leap out and go for me, go for that handle where I no longer had my balance where I'd come from, and I wasn't a sure bet where I was going. But just trust in yourself and take that leap. Part of why we don't do that is just even psychologically is this. One, we are wired to overestimate the size of risks. We're wired to focus more on what could go wrong than on what could go right. We're wired to just catastrophize and come up with these worst case scenarios. And so for you, if you think about right now, what's a conversation I need to have that I've been putting off? Where do I want to put my hand up for an opportunity or a job? Where do I need to call something out? Where do I need to say no? We tend to dwell more on what could go wrong or what we could lose. We could upset somebody. We could mess it all up. We could make a fool of ourselves. And that's where, in our mind's eye, like, we scare ourselves. We create monsters where, out of shadows. And so just being mindful that you are wired to avoid taking risks. But what we're not so good at also is to really get present to what's the cost of not taking the risk. How is it going to impact you if you think about right now where you are and what it is you want to do and what it is that you don't like about where you are now? And let's face it, there's often things we don't love about our work or just an aspect of where we are in our lives. We're not very good at putting ourselves in the shoes of future us 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and asking ourselves, how am I going to feel 1 year from now if I don't do this? And we tend to underestimate the cost of inaction. We think that playing it safe and saying nothing and hoping it all just gets better is the wisest thing to do. It's the sensible thing to do. Certainly it's the most comfortable thing to do, at least in the short term. But it comes with a cost. And we are wired not to really want to confront that cost. And so I just invite you to think about we're playing it safe. We're not speaking up. We're not leaning in. We're not putting your hand up, asking for what you want, having that tough conversation. Where is that actually costing you? Because for you to really achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve, for you to enjoy whatever it is you want to enjoy and experience within your career and within Microsoft and beyond, it does ride on you being willing to choose to do the thing that's uncomfortable, to do the thing that makes you feel vulnerable, to take the risk of making that mistake. So just there's kind of two different mindsets we can approach life with. The risk-averse mindset, which is really there's what I know I can succeed at, there's what is familiar and safe and comfortable, and then there's everything else. So given that, they kind of see everything else is dangerous. And so let's just protect the status quo. Let's not do anything where it's not a sure bet that it'll all go really, really, really well. And so they see really a comfort zone and everything else is a danger zone. I'm not ready. The timing's not right. I need to know more. I could mess up. I could lose what I have. Gee, better to stick with the known. The flip side of that is what I call the risk-ready mindset. It's these three different zones. The comfort zone, absolutely. And then there's what is really risky. Yeah, you know what, I'm not ready for that, or that's just too high a risk. But in the middle, and it really comes to when we have a mindset of focused on learning. It's focused on exploration. And it's really, you can put on experimental hat and go, well, what if I try? Let's see what might be possible. And it knows that you've got to risk sometimes making a mistake and not doing too much in order for you to achieve what it is you want. So I'd love to ask you, if you thought about, if I was going to step into my courage zone, what would I do? What's a risk I would take? It doesn't have to be something massive, but what's something that you could do right now? If you think about your work this week, what's a risk you could take? And when I say risk, I mean you risk the safety you have now. You risk that things may not go exactly as you want. So our conversations that we have, your ultimately, your currency in any workplace is really built on the conversations that you're having and the quality of those conversations. and willingness sometimes to have difficult conversations. So, and you're willing to really speak up your own value, which I talked about here. Sometimes big conversations are very good background. Someone speak yourself. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I felt like I was competing with a freeway. So if just in terms of the conversations you're having every day, the quality of your relationships is built on the quality of the conversations you're having. And your relationships are a way that you build trust, you build respect, you establish value, and that allows you to grow your influence, to get people to do things for you, to influence outcomes even if you don't have authority, to manage up, to manage across, to get people in different silos and divisions working together, to grow collaboration, to sometimes get things that may be derailing back on track, to manage conflict. That, of course, impacts the performance that you have and that your team has, the organisation has, which impacts the results that you all collectively and you individually achieve. Yet often we don't have those conversations because we are afraid that, it may not go the way we want. They're uncomfortable. And so often the most important conversations that you need to have will be the most difficult ones. As you're listening to this right now, I am sure that you have some issues with people that you're working with that are causing you to feel one or several frustrated, resentful, annoyed, angry, undervalued, cross, I don't know. There could be all sorts of different things, the emotions that are coming up for you, offended. And yet it's possible, likely, that I'm sure for some of you, you actually aren't addressing the issues that are causing it. And so it's really important to recognize that it is through conversation that we create possibilities to make things better. Yet when we let our fear of a confrontation or an awkward conversation, of causing offence, of being seen to be difficult, determine the decision we make in the conversations we have, we close out the possibility of things getting better. For instance, if you don't ask for what you really want, then how on earth are you going to get it? People aren't mind readers. So if something's causing you to feel resentful right now, often when I've coached women and they're feeling really resentful or frustrated about something, I'm like, well, if you let them know what you want, well, no, they should just know. They should just know I would want this. I'm like, well, they're busy focused on what they're doing and they're not thinking about what you just want. People aren't mind readers. You have to take responsibility for letting people know what you want. You've got to take responsibility for standing your ground. You teach people how to treat you. So you've got to be really careful that you're not letting your fear of seeming difficult or being pushed around get in the way of saying, no, this isn't okay, I'm not willing to do this, or this isn't what I want to do. Likewise, you've got to sometimes step up and say, okay, I don't want to I don't want to do this, or I do want to do this. Can you give me some support to get this off the ground? So just recognize there's lots of different ways you can be brave in the conversations that you're having. And I'd love you to think about right now something that's causing you to feel some level of angst or dissatisfaction. What's a conversation you need to be having that you're not? Where do you need to step up and be a little braver in the conversations you're having? Likewise, where might you be sometimes undermining yourself and your influence because you don't speak your truth with confidence? I'm not talking about being disrespectful, but not really owning your opinion and saying, look, this is what I think. I know we see things differently, but I really believe if we continue on down this path, we could find ourselves with these problems. Or, with all due respect, I just don't agree with how we're going about this, or with what was said, or whatever the case may be. It's not about being disrespectful. It really is about you respecting the value of your own opinion and yourself. And, you know, that old saying, we do teach people how to treat us. Every conversation you have, you are establishing who you are for people and how they perceive you. So just really stepping up and owning your value, owning your right to have an opinion, owning your worth and asking for it. The next slide. So how do we do that? You know, if we were in a big conference room now, I would get you all to stand up. And if you are not feeling like you're looking like a goose in front of people and you've got space around you, I actually would love you to stand up right now and just play with me here. So your physiology impacts your psychology. And when we struggle with feeling as confident as we'd like or as brave as we would like, one of the simplest interventions we can make on ourselves is shifting how we hold ourselves. So just if you stand tall with your feet shoulder width apart, your shoulders back, you take a couple of big deep breaths right down into your belly and really get that oxygen that so often we're not breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. We're just breathing very shallow breathing, and we're not getting that oxygen, the full quota, through our system and into our brains. And literally just hold yourself as though you were someone to be reckoned with, someone that people want to know, someone that people want on their team, someone whose opinion people need to hear and value highly. And if you hold yourself as that, someone who is determined, is capable, is brave, and really connect with your inner brave heart, just that can actually shift not only how you feel emotionally, but studies have found that actually shifts our physiology. And a study out of Harvard by Amy Cuddy found that it actually releases into our system little micro doses of testosterone, that we literally actually become stronger. And if you think of I don't know if you've ever seen the New Zealand, the All Blacks, or the Maoris, they do their haka dance. You know, yes, it's meant to intimidate the enemy, but it actually measurably, it grows their strength. They are stronger. And so you are stronger when you hold yourself as a strong and powerful woman. So that's the first thing. If you're going into a meeting, if you're going into an interview, if you're going into a difficult conversation, or you're walking into a networking event, whatever it is, just check your physiology. The second thing, check what you're focusing on. Are you focusing on what could go wrong, or are you focusing on what could go right? Are you focusing on the value you want to bring, or are you focusing on what people might think of you if you mess up? Just be careful. Where do you place your focus? Because what you focus on expands. And finally, your language. So the actual words that you use. So often people will use language that diminishes themselves or closes down possibilities. Oh, I've never been able to do that. I'm hopeless at that. Oh, it's just a disaster. You know, sometimes I've talked to someone the other day. I said, how are you? She goes, it's just a nightmare right now. Well, if you're describing a situation as a nightmare, then that's your experience. Our words create our reality. Versus saying, you know what, there's a lot going on. It's really busy. It's a challenge, but I know there's an opportunity for me to learn here, so I'm stepping up to it. So just the way we describe things can really impact how we deal with them and how we speak and how we show up for other people. When I talk to people who say they're stressed, oh my God, I'm so stressed. There's so much going on right now. It's just my boss is stressful. My job is, that we literally talk our stress into existence and make it stressful. So just check your language. What is the language you're using to describe yourself, your situation? Where is the language you're using hemming you in? And honestly, if you can, when we're at our very best, when we get all of those things working in concert together, we're focused on what we can do, on who we want to be, on what's possible. We're standing firm in our power, and we're really using language that expands what's possible and reaffirms for us that we can figure it out. We've got this. Nothing is impossible. Whatever the problems are, they're doable. So next big one, particularly we women, is the compulsion that so often we have to make it be perfect. And I talked about the imposter syndrome earlier, and this impacts so much of our lives and can undermine us in so many ways, even as parents, as mothers. I'm not sure how many of you on this call are mothers, but you'll know if you have children, there's so much pressure on us to try and live up to some unrealistic expectation. The bar has over the last 20 years just gets raised and raised and raised and raised and raised. What a good parent is. And so we kind of feel like we're constantly inadequate. We're not measuring up. But that can be the case in any area of our lives, and even in our work. So often we feel that we have to do things perfectly. We have to be brilliant. We have to be masterful before we put our hand up and try things. It's why I'm sure you've heard so often, if there's a job that's being advertised or internally, it's on the notice board, women will look at it and go, oh, I've only got 8 of the 10 attributes they're looking for, and I know that, number 7 and 8 aren't really strong. I'll wait another year until I have more experience and competence. Often a man will look at it and he's got 6 and he'll go, you know what, I've got 6, I can learn the other 4, put my hand up. So if we think we have to be perfect at something, it's going to hold us back. We're not going to put ourselves out there. We're not going to put our hand up. We can spend too much time on perfecting the PowerPoint presentation or trying to just get stuff done perfectly that's actually getting in the way of us adding more value. Done is better than perfect. So don't let your fear of things not being just as you'd like them to be or making mistakes get in the way of you getting on and getting stuff done. So, with that, if you wait until you can do something perfectly, you will never do as much as you're capable of doing. You need to risk making mistakes. You need to risk doing things less than brilliantly often. And that includes risking more rejections too. And I don't mean rejection for the sake of it, but putting yourself out there and going out and pitching things and suggesting things and trying things, even though, heck, other people might not go, yes, that's brilliant, or yes, let's do it. So yes, done is better than perfect. And finally, that final point is stop comparing yourself with what other people are doing and what other people are good at or what other people have done that you have yet to do. It's not about you being better than everybody else. It's just about you being a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. And you can only do that when you're willing to just let go trying to be perfect and just to go out and try things and experiment and give yourself permission not to do things perfectly every time. In line with that, this point that I want to make here around challenging stories is just relates to everything I'm talking about. We live in our stories about what we can do and can't do. And I know that the stories you have, just be mindful of what are the stories you're telling yourself about what you're doing. Where do you need to disrupt and tell yourself another story? So what's another perspective you could bring? Here, your story is how you think it is, and your story you tell yourself impacts the emotions you feel, which impacts the actions you take, which impacts the outcomes you produce. And so any area where you're not feeling satisfied with how things are, ask yourself, what's another story I could tell myself here? And finally, absolutely, a number one thing that we have to focus on daily is the small things that we do that allow us to bring our best self to the game of life. And the small things you do. So what is it allows you to build your capacity for the work you do, for the juggling act that you've got on, for the leadership roles that you're in and the ones that you aspire to have. And so you've got to just create rituals every day that help you bring your best self to your biggest challenges. So physically, what is it you could do for yourself, or what can you do more of that impacts your energy health and your sense of well-being? Mentally, it allows you to focus on what matters most and not get caught up and distracted with the zillion things you could be doing. Emotionally, that allows you to feel connected and be playful and lighthearted when things don't go well. That also allows you to feel confident and to work through. And finally, that gives you a sense of purpose. What is it that reconnects you to what you care about most? Because in the end of the day, you know, if you think about who you are at your best, the question is, what can you do to be that way more often? Taking care of yourself physically is core, but just how you manage your time, the rituals you have that allow you to focus on what matters most. So just being mindful that those little things that you do every day, the little self-care that so often as women we can subjugate our own needs for others, because we are caring, we are innately wired to care and to be caretakers, and too often we put our needs behind and after other people's. But if you're not that oxygen mask, you know, metaphor, if you're not, how can you look after others if you're not looking after yourself? So I encourage you to think about what are the things that you could do for yourself that would allow you to feel better, to be stronger, to be more focused and more resilient. And just finishing up before we go to Q&A, any of you, I created for my last book, Brave, a 10-day challenge, which is really about you stopping and going, where is it that I need to be braver in how I'm showing up at work? Because courage is a muscle, and confidence, which goes hand in hand with it, the more often you practice it, the braver, the more confident you become. And even if it's just the little things that you're doing every day, it's so important that you step up and go, all right, just for today, I'm going to go and ask my boss for some guidance on something, even though I'm afraid he might think I'm being annoying, or that he might think that I should just know this myself when I'm not sure. Or I'm going to ask somebody to do the thing that is difficult, you know, that I'm not sure how to go about it, or I'm going to go and say, hey, I'd like to be given some more opportunities. I'd like some more, or I'd like some more support. So I encourage you to sign up for that. And now I'd like to get over to open up the lines for some Q&A.
Thanks, Margie. I just went out to the site to take the challenge.
Oh, good, great.
Who has a question for Margie? Or either come off mute, please, or if you can put your questions in the window.
Sarah, this is Janet. I have a question.
Great, thanks, Janet.
Okay, so great sharing. I really appreciate it. And one of the things that I want to share with you and also ask you about how you handle is when you do speak up, if you're being told that you're, because I do speak up, everyone who knows me knows that, if you're being told that you're too aggressive or your style isn't quite right, I mean, it seems to me that what a woman can speak up and say that's accepted in the workplace and what a man can speak up and say that's accepted in the workplace are different. And I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you raised that. So thank you. Absolutely. So where men can be seen as strong and assertive, women can be seen as bossy and bitchy and domineering. And my guess is you may have had a little bit of that feedback that, oh, you're too strong and you're too pushy or whatever. So you know, a few years ago, Sheryl Sandberg had a campaign that was, you know, hashtag ban bossy, and I disagreed with it because I think it's not ban bossy, it's embrace bossy. But it's not about being bossy. It is just about owning your right to speak up and do that. But what's really fascinating here, and my advice to you is, research has found that when we preface what we have to say by acknowledging the unconscious bias that exists against women who speak up, it actually makes our words and what we have to say land better. And so when we preface what we say by saying something, look, I realize some people may feel that I'm being a little bit too forceful here, and I don't mean to be that way, but I do believe, and then say what it is you want to say. So you actually acknowledge that that you could be perceived as being bossy or forceful or, you know, pushy or whatever it is. But by acknowledging that first, and it is, of course, it is really important. I have met women who I've found to be so forceful that I feel like I'm being run over. And so I think it is really important. Obviously, the effectiveness of our communication is determined by how it lands on the ears of other people. So if you're constantly getting feedback that you're being too forceful, or, and I'm not saying that you are, but that, you know, wow, could you just tone it down a little bit? Take that on, because maybe that is getting in the way of you being as effective as you want to be. That's not to say that what you have to say isn't of great value, but maybe there's a way you could soften it by with prefacing it. Like, I recognize everyone here has an opinion they feel really strongly about, and I don't want to seem like I know there's a lot to be shared. However, I really think so. Just maybe dialing it down from a 9 or 10 to an 8 or 7 may allow you to be more effective in getting it across. But it's just, I share that simply because I know there is that unconscious bias against women. It doesn't mean we shouldn't speak up and own our opinion, but I do think sometimes we can convey it in ways that people can hear it. And if you need to defer and respect, absolutely, Tom, what you have to say is so true, and really value, that what you've shared. And I also think, instead of saying but, because but refutes what they've just said, you can say and adds to what they've said, even if in essence you may be kind of semi-refuting it. So I wrote a Forbes column on this a while back, how to speak up, when how to, not to be too nice. I'll find that link and I'll send it to the ladies and they can send it to you, because I actually share some tips on that. So yes, thank you for that question. Next one.
We'll post the link out on the LinkedIn site when you send that over, Margie. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Who else has a question? I know lots of people on this call, and I know there's people that aren't shy.
Hey guys, this is Jenny Cordell, and I had a question.
Thank you.
As somebody who is an expert in this, how do you do ongoing education or learning about these topics that you just presented on?
How do I do ongoing education and learning?
Yep, just around these topics.
Oh, all the time. So I mean, obviously there's some great books. There's other people who are out there who are experts in these fields. My own just interactions with people and working with different organisations too. There's a lot of diversity initiatives, as you know, around the world right now, and big corporations are really investing heavily in it. So there's some great research that comes out of whether it's McKinsey, certainly some of the big banks and some of the big organisations have some really interesting research that comes out too. So yeah, a whole lot of different sources. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. Also, actually, if I may ask a follow-up, just from the perspective of you are an international author, and the advice and mentorship that you give, do you think that it's pretty consistent across the world, or do you think that there's some unique cultural differences that you are aware of, and from that perspective you coach women differently?
Yeah, you know what, obviously we are absolutely impacted by our culture, and there are differences culturally across different, countries and parts of the world. So that always impacts, any coaching conversation or advice. What the advice you give to somebody operating in Japan is, if they went about things doing it the same way you may do it sitting in Microsoft headquarters, may get them, maybe a massive career limiting move. So you've got to take cultural context into things. So the norms of cultures definitely impact both the most effective way to communicate. In for instance, in Asia, since moving back to Australia a few years ago, I've done more work in Asia. If you're completely direct with someone, it can be just incredibly offensive to them. I mean, and they may close down and never open up again. Whereas in Australia or the US, you can be far more direct in giving, say, feedback or sharing your opinion on something. So I think you've absolutely got to take that into account. And interestingly, though, women in Australia I find to be more misogynist than the US. I think, in the US, while there's unconscious bias and women absolutely have got to deal with challenges, I find in Australia, there actually is more sexism, is more prevalent in the workplace than it is in the US. Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions? You can certainly type it in the chat window too. There's some commentary going on a quote or a factoid that Janet put out there, Margie, in the chat window.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I haven't seen.
It said men will apply for jobs when they fit 60% of the criteria. Women, on average, will only apply when they fit 100% of the criteria. So there's just some commentary going on there.
Yeah. And that is, I'm not sure if that is, obviously it may vary industry to industry, job to job, but there's no doubt about it that as women, we tend to want to feel like we are more risk averse, and we want to feel like we've got more of our bases covered, and we're more hesitant when it comes to taking a risk and stepping into a role that we don't feel really prepared for. And men are more confident in figuring it out as they go along. And I've met numerous women who've said some of the best things they ever did was saying yes to roles that they really were terrified they weren't quite ready for. They didn't know everything. They had to figure it out. They absolutely felt out of their depth, but they did figure it out. And then they realized, thank God I said yes to this. And I've met a lot who said, I turned down roles because I didn't think I was ready. And then they went and gave it to a guy who was nowhere near as skilled as what I was. And they're like, man, and I was watching him flounder, and I was like, I could have done that. But they let that, no, I'm not quite ready, get in the way. So, yeah.
There's one other factoid that or story I want to share that goes back to women not perceiving their own value. And a manager at Microsoft shared the following information with me. I thought it was really interesting. This person has hired both men and women on their team. And the person shared that every single man negotiated up their base salary. None of the women did.
Yeah, there was a great study out of Cornell. They were grads out of Cornell a few years ago. What they found was 57%, they were first year out, off MBA grads, and they were offered the base salary. 57% of the men negotiated up what was being offered straight out of grad school. 7% of women did. Yeah. And if you think about how that impacts over the trajectory of an entire career, over the entire career, if someone, however much they got, and then at the next one they ask again and they ask again and ask again, we end up with millions of dollars difference in income. So yes, there are women who do ask, but there are a lot who don't ask, and they leave money on the table. And recognizing also, you don't always get everything you ask for, right? You may ask. I have a woman share with me the other day. She'd read a column I wrote last year. She went out, she asked for an increase. She works in academia. She was told there was no money for it. And she said, oh, well, okay, I asked. She kind of was like, I don't even know if I should have asked, but I did ask and there was no money. And then this year they must have had extra funding, and she emailed me to say, and I just got the biggest pay increase I've ever got 9 months after that conversation. So clearly she'd logged it with them that she felt she was worth more. They couldn't give her more at the time, and then 9 months later she was getting it. So it doesn't always mean you immediately get what you want, but you've said, hey, I value myself this highly. And I think people then perceive you differently. Well, heck, good on you for doing that. And we don't want to lose you to a competitor either. So I just think there's all sorts of ways we benefit from having the guts to sometimes make a bold request and do that. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
All right, we probably have time for one more question. I think there's some questions for the Microsoft folks just in the chat window that we could potentially move over to the LinkedIn site just for a conversation out there for people to add to. Who else? Any last questions? All right. Well, Margie, I want to thank you for being on today with us. I thought your talk was so inspiring. I already went out and took the Am I Brave test on your website. So thank you so much for your time and your talents today and sharing your perspectives with us. We really appreciate it. And for those of you on the call, I hope you enjoyed Margie. I know I did. And we're really looking forward to the next few months and the talks that we have coming up. Please take an opportunity to go out and check out Margie's site. In addition to making sure if you haven't joined our LinkedIn group that you go ahead and do that. And then the recording will be available, Skype issues and all, on the women's channel out on the YouTube page. So I put that in the window a couple times, and then that'll also be posted on the LinkedIn site. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, ladies. Thank you. And, you know, I've got a few videos I created for Raw Courage TV that I'll send you links to as well. Perfect. On how to speak up and all those, some of the things I touched on that I'm happy for you to share on that LinkedIn site too. So great.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.